Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. So today I was browsing Pinterest like I normally do, looking for inspiration, and I found this cute graph that's for crocheting. I printed it out. I've never tried making a graph gan before, or I forgot what it's called. I've never tried making a graph, crocheting a graph, or doing the, I forgot what the method is called, but I've been calling them graph cans. So I've never tried crocheting a graph before, and I've been wanting to get into it. And the person who created this graph and posted it on Pinterest did such a detailed job. I'm going to give you a close-up. Like, they literally numbered the stitches, so you know exactly how many stitches you have to do. You don't necessarily have to count. And this seems to be like a really good beginner-friendly graph to practice with. So that is what we're going to do today. I'm going to see if I can work on this graph. I'm hoping to finish it tonight. I'm going to work on it for the next 3 or 4 hours. I think this should be enough time to get this done, and we'll see how it comes out. I did watch a couple of videos as well to kind of get an understanding of how to do this type of crochet, and I rolled up my skeins into little balls. I did 2 skeins of white, so I didn't have to cut and go back, cut and keep reattaching the white yarn every time we change direction or we change colors. So you can see I start with white over here and white over here, and so I just did 2 balls, so I didn't have to keep cutting. And I'm trying this technique that I found on YouTube, where you're not going to have a lot of extra yarn left over or scraps left over, because you're not cutting and restarting, and you're not necessarily carrying the yarn. So we'll see how it goes. This is how it's looking so far. I've done the chain row and 3. I've done the starting chain and 3 rows, and this is what it's looking like. You can barely see the pink though, because I am using a lighter pink. This is what it looks like so far. This is the back. As you can see, I don't have any scraps in the back. So far this technique is working out great. I'm going to share my progress with you as I go, but this is not a tutorial. I'm just showing you the process of doing my very first graph gan. Let me actually look up what the name of this is called. And let me see if you can get a better picture of that. That's what it's looking like so far. Let me turn down the brightness of this light so you can get to see it properly. So that is what the tapestry looks like so far. And this is our original graph. I started at, I left off right here at the bottom of the eyes. And this is my first time doing any type of Intarsia crochet, or Tapestry crochet as it's called. And while I was working on this specific graph, I did notice some things that I wish I would have done differently. So I'm going to share that with you, and then I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do differently on the next graph. For one, this is a pretty simple graph, right? When it comes to the colors, I do wish that I had picked more contrasting colors. I should have made the cat black so it would be easier to see. In addition, I don't feel like every graph is created equally. Like, this is a pretty good graph if you know what you're doing, but if you're a super beginner like myself, or if you're new to crocheting, it doesn't tell you what direction to go in. So if you've worked on a project before where you're working in lines, you know that when you get to the end of each row, you're going to have to turn. So if you've done like a washcloth or a wearable like a dress or sweater, or if you've done a scarf, you typically work in rows instead of rounds. And when you're working in rows, at the end of each row, you're gonna chain and turn, and then start the process all over again. So, and typically if you're right-handed, you're starting right to left. So I would start here, work on this row, and in the next row, go in this direction and work starting from this end to this end. So it's very easy to make a mistake if you don't know what you're doing and start on this row, turn your work, and then start on this row, turn your work, and then start on this row instead of going right to left for each row. So that's one of the things that I noticed. And I used acrylic yarn for this project. I used the Big Twist spec yarn, I believe it was called. It's this one right here. I used the Big Twist fleck yarn. So you can see it has little specks in it. It's very soft. It's a weight 4 yarn. It's acrylic, and it's very, very soft, and it splits very easily. And for the white, I use the Premier Yarns Value in the color white. That's a very soft yarn as well, but I didn't get any splitting with that. And when it comes to the yarn for Intarsia Crochet or Tapestry Crochet, especially depending on what you're making, I was going to turn this into a tapestry, but I feel like a thicker yarn or a sturdier yarn might be better for a tapestry. So I think on the next scrap I'm going to use cotton yarn and see how that turns out. In terms of the stitches, so I did half double crochets for this project, and as you can see, I have there's like a lot of holes in here. Let me turn down the light again. There are a lot of holes. And one of the things that I'm going to do differently with the next tapestry is I'm going to use a smaller needle. So I think I use a 5.5 needle for this project. So when it comes to the crochet hook, as you can see, I have a lot of holes in this project. I did use a 5.5 millimeter crochet hook to work this up, and I think I should have used a smaller crochet hook, maybe like a 5 or a 4.5. So I think in the next tapestry, that's what I'm going to do. I'm either going to do a 4.5. I think a 5 might still be too big, so I'm going to use a 4.5, a 5, or a 4 depending. And I did say that I was going to use a cotton yarn and see how it works out. In terms of the stitch, I use a half double crochet for this project, a half double crochet stitch. I think that could be okay for wearables, especially if you're using the appropriate sized hook. But I think for a tapestry, if I'm using cotton yarn and I want tighter, more uniform stitches, especially stitches that are going to look like a square, I think a single crochet stitch is going to be best to get like tighter stitches that are going to mimic a square. Because as you can see, like these are all squares. Like to get the desired image, we're working in squares. So that is what I'm going to do. I did find another chart that I'm going to work on. I'm not going to finish this one because like I'm not going to do anything with this. I don't like how it's looking, particularly because of the technique. So I'm not going to finish it. I am going to do this chart that I think is very pretty. And like I said, I'm gonna make the changes that I mentioned that I was gonna make to see how this comes out. And from there, going forward, when I'm doing a tapestry, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna use cotton yarn. I'm gonna use a smaller hook to get tighter, more uniform stitches. I'm gonna do single crochet stitches, and I'm gonna use like better contrasting colors. Like you see the colors on this, they work really well together to where you can see the shapes better. In terms of the technique that I used, where I put the yarn in bags and I introduced a new color each time, you know, there was like a detail to be changed. Like, so for instance, if I was working on this graph, I would do 3 single crochets here and a white, and then I would change to blue. And I would introduce a new blue color instead of like carrying the yarn from this side to this side. Same here. I would stop here with the blue, introduce black, and then introduce a new blue color instead of carrying the yarn. Some people do carry the yarn or float the yarn. I think if you carry the yarn, which I did try to do here, what I notice is that the color that you're carrying, it shows through it. I don't know if you could see that, but it shows through, and I just feel like that's not going to be neat. So the color is going to show through when you carry the yarn. Also, I think it depends on the technique that you're using and how tight your stitches are and the colors that you're using. But for me, I just don't feel like it's neat enough. You could also float the yarn. So what's going to happen when you do that is that like you're going to end up with these lines on the back of your project. So it's not going to be reversible, because on the back you're going to have a bunch of these lines where you're changing the color. So it's not going to be reversible, where both sides are going to look the same. So that's why I decided that it would probably be best to just introduce the colors every time there's a new color change, instead of floating or carrying the yarn. So we're gonna see how that works out, obviously, that means I'm gonna have a lot more tails to weave in, but because this is such a simple graph, I don't think it's gonna be an issue. Also, what I did notice too is that with when you're making a graph, and that's something that I'm going to get into maybe I'll save that for later, but I do plan on making my own graph and seeing how that goes, and then working that up and showing you all as well. So I'm going to go work on this, and then I'll come back and show you the results with the techniques that I mentioned in this video. All right, stay tuned. So I just said I was going to use cotton yarn for this, so let me show you the yarns that I have. I have the Lily sugar and cream cotton yarn in black. That's going to do the cat. I have the Lily sugar and cream. This is like a beige or off-white color. And then I don't have a plain blue Lily's cotton yarn. I have this variegated yarn, not sure how it's going to look, so I'm considering using this one. I also have this turquoise, but I don't know. Of course, I could take creative liberties with this, but I still want all the colors to go well together. This is how it looks. It'll look together, all three, which isn't bad, but turquoise doesn't really say nighttime. And then I have the purple one, which I think might be a better fit, but I kind of want to see how the variegated background would look. I think that would be pretty cool. So I'm gonna make some smaller balls out of the yarn that I have, because as I said, during the color change, I'm just going to introduce introduce it as a new color instead of carrying or floating the yarn, and see how it looks. Hey y'all, so welcome back. This is the final tapestry. This is what it looks like. This is the back. And I will say that the techniques that I implemented worked out 1000%. So just a reminder, this is where I started with the first tapestry. As you can see, the stitch definition, like the outline of the cat is there, right? And it probably would have looked decent, but it's not this. And it looks good on the back side also. And I'm glad I used the variegated yarn for the background because it gives it more of like a sky feeling, like a sky vibe, you know, because the cat's sitting on the moon. I think this is so freaking cute and I'm so proud of myself. So here are my tips to get darn near perfect tapestries if you are a beginner. So this is where I started and this is where I finished in less than a week. So first things first, I think the yarn really makes a huge difference. For this project, this one, the blue one, I use the Lily's Sugars and Cream cotton yarn, 100% cotton. It's not a blend of anything. And I believe it's a weight 4 yarn. And for this project, I had used the Big Twist Spec yarn, which is a very soft yarn. Doesn't give great stitch definition. It's super lightweight. I do feel like if you're going to do tapestry crochet to hang, I personally would prefer something with a little bit more sturdiness to it or weight to it, like this cotton yarn. I heard wool yarn is really great for tapestry as well. I might try that on a tapestry. Acrylic yarn is great too for tapestries. I think that what's important is that you're using the right crochet hook size and also the right stitch. So for this I used single crochet, and for the first one I used half double crochet, and I will say that I was able to get tighter, more uniform stitches, probably because this was a single crochet. I do think though that for wearables, if I were to, I am going to try a tapestry and I'm going to turn it into a wearable. And I think for that project, I'm going to do a half double crochet, but I'm also going to make sure that I use the right crochet hook just so the stitches are tighter and there aren't any holes. And that brings me to the hook size. For me, I found that the 4.5 hook size was perfect for this. On that tapestry, I used a 5.5 hook, and I just think that was too big because I had a lot of holes in the project and the stitches were not tight enough. So, and now in terms of the technique, I decided to introduce a new color every time there was a color change. So I started off with the blue yarn. And then when I got to here, I introduced black, and then I got to here, I introduced blue again instead of carrying or floating the yarn. And I think that's what made the tapestry look come out so neat. In terms of technique, when it comes to the color changes, I don't feel like I've really kind of narrowed it down on how to transition colors and get like smooth edges. Not that it matters, you still get the idea. Let me show you the original. I don't really feel like it matters that much. I mean, it still looks like the graph. So even though the edges aren't exactly perfect, you get the picture. It still looks the same, but I do wish that I could get smoother edges when doing the color changes. So that's something I'll continue to work on. And in terms of technique, what I did notice too is like the stars, they don't really look like stars. And I think again, that has to do with the color changes. The stars were just one block on the bottom, 2 blocks and then 1 block on top, but it didn't really translate to that, but I guess you get the idea. You could still tell that they're supposed to be stars. But like I said, I haven't really narrowed down how to get the smoothest color change, so that, like, you know, the edges are more uniform and then the smaller shapes look exactly the way that they're supposed to look. And in terms of technique, when it came to weaving in the ends, I started to weave in the ends as I went. And then I was like, these are too many ends, because I introduced a new piece of yarn every time there was a color change. I had a lot of ends in the back. So all I did was tie them together and cut them. And honestly, you can't even tell that this is what I did. It's the front, that's the back. You can't even tell that I've knotted and tied off the loose ends. So I mean, of course, do what works for you. If you feel like weaving in the ends are going to be neater, but honestly, no one really cares about the back of the project anyway. I think it's just a matter of your preference. So, and the same can be said for whether you decide to introduce a new color, a new piece of yarn when there's a color change, or whether you decide to float or carry your yarn. Nobody really cares about the back of the project. This is just a personal preference. I want the whole thing to be uniform. That way I could, even if I'm not going to showcase it from the back because it's not so perfect, you know, I still want it to look uniform. So use your discretion and do what works best for you. Also, I guess, you know, you're going to want to know like where to get graphs or how to make graphs. I have been experimenting a little bit with Stitch Fiddle, and I've created a couple of graphs that I'll share some pictures with you so you can see how they come out. And what I'm realizing is that even if you have the perfect picture, you're still going to have to do a bit of editing and cleaning up it in Stitch Fiddle. And even if you have like a small picture that you're turning into a graph, it could take a very long time. So making those graphs is not as easy as it looks. But in terms of the software, Stitch Fiddle is really the software that I've found that gives the most instructions on how to use it and how to get decent graphs. You can use it for free or you can pay for a subscription. I paid for a subscription. When you pay for a subscription, you could generate a graph and written instructions. So, you know, if you prefer to just have written instructions versus counting the box, then, you know, you can do that also. But also in their software, I'll try to do a side-by-side. In their software, they have it where, you know, it can guide you line by line. So you don't have to print out the graph. You can use the software as you're crocheting, as you're making your tapestry, and it'll guide you line by line with written instructions, of course, with the paid subscription. And I'll share some information about the cost of the subscription if that's what you wanted to do. But if you didn't want to go that route, if you don't want to make your own graph, there are plenty of graphs on the internet. I think I prefer going the Stitch Fiddle route because you do have those written instructions and you don't have to number the boxes and you don't have to count as you go. But a lot of the graphs that I'm finding online for free, I find on Pinterest, but they don't come with written instructions, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with counting the boxes and label them yourself because someone else has already done all the work. So you can find a lot of free graphs on a variety of topics on Pinterest, like really detailed graphs. And I'll share where I'll share the link to this graph and the original graph that I shared with you all if you want to, you know, try these tapestries, if you want to make your own. So Stitch Fiddle, Pinterest for free graphs. You could also purchase graphs on Etsy. I've never purchased graphs on Etsy. I have purchased regular patterns on Etsy and I haven't really had any issues. And I'm assuming that if someone is going to sell a graph on Etsy, they're going to include some written instructions. But I would not buy a graph if it didn't come with written instructions, or at the very least, if the boxes weren't numbered. So, you know, they've done majority of the work, and it warrants handing over your hard-earned money. So those are my suggestions for finding graphs. Pinterest for free graphs, Stitch Fiddle if you want to make your own, paid subscription if you want written instructions, or if you want like a more guided experience when you're crocheting the tapestry. That is what I do. You could also try finding graphs on Etsy. Those are the platforms that I'm recommending because those are the platforms that I've used. And those are all my tips. Make sure you are choosing the appropriate weight yarn. Like I mentioned, I prefer a sturdier, more weighty yarn like cotton. Or I heard wool was great. Haven't tried wool. We'll try in the future. I would use acrylic yarn for wearables. And tip number 2, make sure that you're choosing the appropriate stitch. I think single crochet is perfect for making tapestries. I think half double crochets are okay as well. Just make sure that your tension is good so that your stitches are uniform and there aren't any holes in your project. I would also make sure that you are choosing the appropriate sized hook for the yarn that you're using. I think with a smaller size hook, you do get more uniform and neater stitches. And in terms of technique, I do personally prefer to introduce a new yarn each time there's a color change instead of floating or carrying the yarn, because I feel like it looks neater on both sides of the project. And when it comes to weaving in the ends, I prefer to just tie them together and cut them off because that's a lot easier than weaving in 100 ends. And of course, that's based on your personal preference. And when it comes to finding graphs for your project, you can try Pinterest for free. I'll put a link to the graphs that I found. I'll put that information in the description box. You can use Stitch Fiddle to make your own graphs. It also generates written instructions if you pay for the subscription. It also guides you as you're crocheting your tapestry. And you could try Etsy for written patterns. I personally would not purchase a graph, without it having some sort of written instructions, or at least having the boxes be numbered. And lastly, I'm going to be crocheting more tapestries because I do love this. I think it's extremely satisfying. It's like painting. You know, I used to paint with acrylic paint and watercolor all the time, and I love that. I love turning a blank piece of paper into a piece of beautiful art. And I feel like that's what I've done with this tapestry. I've turned some yarn into this beautiful piece of art that I can hang and look at every day, and that looks like my cat. And so I do find that tapestry crocheting is super satisfying, it's super calming, and with everything going on in the world, sometimes you just need a break to center yourself and get lost for a couple of hours. So maybe in my next project I'll go live and we can crochet together. But anyways, those are my tips. If you are a beginner wanting to try tapestry crochet or Intarsia Crochet, is that what it's called? Yes, Tapestry Crochet or Intarsia Crochet, I hope you found these tips helpful. Also, I forgot to mention a couple of creators that I followed to get an idea of how to get like a decent tapestry. Erlina Stitch Her Hands, I follow her on TikTok, on Facebook. She goes live all the time sharing techniques about how to crochet tapestry, and her tapestries look so good and she moves so fast. TL Yarn Crafts, She did a video where she shared tips for beginners on how to do Intarsia Crochet or Tapestry Crochet. I did watch her video as well. And Crochet Chris has a video where she kind of lays out for you how to do the color changes and, you know, how to and some beginner friendly tips on how to get like the perfect tapestry and get it to look uniform, like the back looks the same as the front. So those are the creators that I recommend that you follow or watch their videos. Also, if you want to learn how to get good at tapestry crochet or start doing tapestry crochet, those are the videos that I watch. Those are the people that I follow. And I'll put their information in the description box, because I know that this video wasn't necessarily a tutorial. I'm just kind of sharing some of the tips that I learned along the way to go from this really sad tapestry to this little masterpiece that I'm going to hang on my wall. So I hope this video was helpful for someone. If it was, subscribe to the channel and I'll share more of my crochet experience and journey with you. All right, I will see you in the next video. Bye.